This Sunday school lesson is for December the 30th, 2018. The title of this message is Wise Men Worship Christ. This is the Union Gospel Press version. The scriptures will be from the New Living Translation. The lesson text is Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Related scriptures are Micah chapter 5, 1 through 4, John chapter 7, 40 through 43, and chapter 18, 33 through 40, and Revelations chapter 12, 1 through 5. Today's aim, or the facts, to understand the dynamics of this historic event, to appreciate the spiritual significance of the Messiah's birth, to live victoriously through the illumination of all of God's prophecies in the Word. Beginning with chapter 2, verse 1.
Chapter 2. Visitors from the East. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?"
Okay, reading commentary from verses 1 through 4. This is a long one. Bethlehem is a small town 5 miles south of Jerusalem. It sits on a high ridge over 2,000 feet above sea level. It is mentioned in more detail in the Gospel of Luke. Luke also explains why Joseph and Mary were in Bethlehem when Jesus was born rather than in Nazareth, their hometown. The land of Israel was divided into 4 political districts and several lesser territories. Judea was to the south, Samaria in the middle, Galilee to the north, and Idumea in the southwest. Bethlehem of Judea, also called Judah, chapter 2:6, had been prophesied as the Messiah's birthplace. Micah 5:2. Jerusalem was also in Judea and was the seat of government for Herod the Great, king over all 4 political districts. After Herod's death, the districts were divided among 3 separate rulers. See the note on chapter 2, 19 through 22. Although he was a ruthless, evil man who murdered many in his own family, Herod the Great supervised the renovation of the temple, making it much larger and more beautiful. This made him popular with many Jews. Jesus would visit Jerusalem many times because the great Jewish festivals were held there. Not much is known about these wise men. We don't know where they came from or how many were there. Tradition says they were men of high position from Parthia, near the site of ancient Babylon. How did they know that the star represented the Messiah? 1. They could have been Jews who remained in Babylon after the exile of the Old Testament predictions of the Messiah's coming. 2. They may have been Eastern astrologers who studied ancient manuscripts from around the world. Because of the Jewish exile centuries earlier, they would have had copies of the Old Testament in their land. 3. They may have had a special message from God directing them to the Messiah. Some scholars say that these wise men were each from a different land, representing the entire world bowing before Jesus. These men from faraway lands recognized Jesus as the Messiah when most of God's chosen people in Israel did not. Matthew pictures Jesus as the king over the whole world, not just Judea. Herod the Great was quite disturbed when the wise men asked about a newborn king of the Jews because 1. Herod was not the rightful heir to the throne of David. Therefore, many Jews hated him as a usurper. If Jesus really was an heir, trouble would arise. 2. Herod was ruthless, and because of his many enemies, he was suspicious that someone would try to overthrow him. 3. Herod didn't want the Jews, a religious people, to unite around a religious figure. 4. If these wise men were of Jewish descent and from Parthia, the most powerful region next to Rome, they would have welcomed a Jewish king who could swing the balance of power away from Rome. The land of Israel, far from Rome, would have been easy prey for a nation trying to gain more control. The text tells us that not only was Herod disturbed, but so was everyone in Jerusalem. When Jesus was born into the world, people immediately began to react. His presence did not soothe and comfort most people. Instead, it startled and disturbed them. In some, he awakened spiritual longings. In others, fear and insecurity. Things have not changed that much. Jesus still disturbs people. If it is true that God entered our world when Jesus was born, we dare not sit idly by, ignoring and rationalizing our inaction. We must acknowledge Jesus as the rightful king of our lives. The leading priests and teachers of religious law were aware of Micah 5:2 and other prophecies about the Messiah. Matthew repeatedly highlighted their knowledge and unbelief. The wise men's news troubled Herod because he knew that Jewish people expected the Messiah to come soon. Luke chapter 3:15. Most Jews expected the Messiah to be a great military and political deliverer, like Alexander the Great. Herod's counselors would have told Herod this. No wonder this ruthless man took no chances and ordered all the baby boys in Bethlehem to be killed. Chapter 2:16. Continuing with verses 5.
In Bethlehem in Judea, they said, for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too. After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy.
Most religious leaders believe in a literal fulfillment of all Old Testament prophecy. Therefore, they believe the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem as foreseen by the prophet Micah 7 centuries earlier. Micah 5:2. Ironically, when Jesus was born, these same religious leaders became his greatest enemies. When the Messiah for whom they had been waiting finally came, they didn't recognize him. Herod did not want to worship Christ. He was lying. This was a trick to get the wise men to return to him and reveal the whereabouts of the newborn king. Herod's plan was to kill Jesus.
They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod.
Jesus was probably 1 or 2 years old when the wise men found him. By this time, Mary and Joseph were married, living in a house, and intending to stay in Bethlehem for a while. For more on Joseph and Mary stayed there, see the note on Luke 2:39. The wise men gave these expensive gifts as worthy acknowledgement for a future king. Bible students have been in the gift symbols, have seen in the gifts symbols of Christ's identity and what he would accomplish. Gold was a gift of royalty. Frankincense was a gift of deity. And myrrh was a spice used to anoint the body for burial. These gifts may have had provided the financial resources for the trip to Egypt and back. The wise men brought gifts and worshiped Jesus for who he was. This was the essence of true worship, honoring Christ for who he is and being willing to give him what is valuable to you. Worship God because he is the perfect, just, and almighty creator of the universe, worthy of the best you have to give. After finding Jesus and worshiping him, the wise men were warned by God not to return through Jerusalem as they had intended. Finding Jesus may mean that your life must take a different direction, one that is responsive and obedient to God's word. In what ways has Jesus affected the direction of your life? Feel free to comment, share, subscribe, and thumbs up the video. Okay, practical points. Wise men recognize the importance of worshiping Christ. The power of Christ troubles the ungodly. Having head knowledge of God's word does not equal having heart knowledge. God knows our heart and recognizes false worship. God will provide guidance and direction for those who diligently seek the Lord. The presence of the Lord brings overwhelming joy. Worshiping the Lord is always in order. God's divine protection covers his children. This concludes the Sunday School lesson for December the 30th, 2018. Y'all have a good day and see you on the next one.